Welcome to this edition of the Mayor's Corner. I'm glad you can join for this particular program, as today I am having a good conversation. I think it's going to be a good conversation with Jennifer Rodenbeck, our Director of Finance and Business for the City of Cedar Falls. So welcome. I'm not sure if we've done one of these programs yet, but as you probably know, the finance parts of things for me isn't one of my strengths. Mine's more the economic development and and other things that relate to the job of mayor. So I'm really, really glad that you're on staff because you've been able to convey to me the basics and some details, which I've appreciated, and I've grown so much in the role that you have there as far as the knowledge and making sure that our city is run right with the finances. So thank you for joining me today. I wanted to kind of go through, we had just finished our fiscal year, July 30th, correct?
Correct.
June 30th.
June 30th.
Yeah.
Sorry, I wasn't listening, I guess.
Okay. You got to watch me here. So June 30th, now we're starting our new fiscal year. So I thought it appropriate. We've had basically a couple of months under our belt in terms of our finances, how our city is sitting. And I recall when I believe we sold some bonds, we had a representative from Moodys come to a committee meeting. And that individual was kind of going through what Moodys looks like, and of course, looks at. And of course, Moodys is the premier organization that looks at finances for cities and businesses and different organizations. And the gentleman just kept saying all the things that Cedar Falls was doing well, the things they look at, like the growing tax base, healthy finance operations, growth in reserves, and modest debt burdens. And I joked with him and said he could have more time and keep bragging about our city, but I'm going to leave that up to you today as well. So can you go in a little bit more details with how Moodys does look at a city's financial performance and how we're doing so far? Sure,
happy to. Well, just like you said, there's lots of factors they look at. One of the big things is what is our tax base doing? And why they are so interested in our tax base, of course, is because that's where we get most of our revenue. We levy a tax against property values, and so they want to look at what is our potential to be able to keep generating that revenue. We've been very fortunate in Cedar Falls that we've seen growth. I mean, people can drive around town and probably know that, but it's nice when you actually see the numbers and you see that that's really happening. We were also very fortunate. Moodys has a rating scale that they use. AAA is the best. Sometimes people may have heard that, that companies are AAA rated. And so actually for Cedar Falls, we're just one step below that, a AA1. So we're very proud of the fact that we're not quite to the top, so we still have something to strive for, but we're just right there.
Now, one caveat, I remember that gentleman who came and spoke, he had mentioned one of the main reasons we're not the top of the top is our size.
Right.
I don't know if that was population or dollars. I don't know if you know that, but just in terms of the size of our city, wouldn't merit the AAA, but it's still something to strive for.
Right, exactly. And I think we can get there. Again, our population and our valuation is probably going to be a little undersized compared to some of those AAAs, but again, I think they see, just like you said, so many good things going on at Cedar Falls that I think we just are right there, and maybe the next time we can get there.
And I know I've been touting since I get the numbers each month, and as we were leading up to the end of the fiscal year, and then of course once we had the final numbers, one measurement that the city looks into or looks at each year is the property valuations. And typically it's broken down to 3 different sectors within our community. And I believe the last 3 years ago, I think we were at $152 million of new permits.
Sure.
And then last year was 113 or 119.
Sure, I don't know that off the top of my head either, Mayor.
But I just sprung it on you. And this year I think it was 129 million. So those numbers in and of itself is 130, it looks like, as far as the graph is concerned. So those broken down, residential property valuations can range from someone adding on to their home or building a brand new home. It kind of just runs the gamut. And commercial, industrial, I think that's what probably most people see if they drive through downtown this last summer. I think at one time there's 5 cranes putting various structures together downtown. And then the multi-residential, we kind of see that through our community as well. So this measurement, maybe you can confirm, but I've been told that if for a city our size, if we're between 80 and 100 million, we're doing well.
Oh, exactly. I think for us, we always knew that 100 million was always going to be a great year for us, you know, and so I think anything that's just right around there, we know we're seeing good things. You know, we did see over a 4% increase when we got our assessed valuations. And again, I think, you know, people may think, that doesn't seem like a big number. I think for us, we also know there are cities in Iowa that are maybe seeing devaluation or they're not seeing any growth at all. So I think for us, we're always thankful that at least we're seeing growth. And I think for us too, what was really important this last year, and not to get into a lot of the mechanics and details of how property taxes work, but there's rollback on different categories of properties, and those went down for most properties this last year, whether you're residential, multi-residential, and for us, our growth was more than what we lost in that rollback, and I think we might have been the only entity in Blackhawk County that happened. So I think, again, for us, that growth just helps us when other things might be getting taken away or rolled down. At least we have growth to offset that.
In essence, it's because new buildings are coming, new growth happened, there's basically more revenue coming in.
Right.
And that, I think to your point there a second ago, was it cures a lot of ills if there's revenue coming in, because some things are beyond our control with what the state does with our the taxing entities. But if our growth is beyond that, we can kind of keep cruising. There's not really a spike up or down for what we're asking of our citizens. And speaking of which, I know that for fiscal 19, the 20 largest cities, Cedar Falls is the third lowest taxed, if you will, city in the state. And this graphic shows here, I think, this shows, now everybody gets their tax bill. It's not the funnest day of the year for property taxes, but these numbers shown here, the 33.23, includes what the city is taxing, what the schools are taxing, and what the county is taxing. Is that accurate?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. And so this number is good for us, I think, overall as we look, not to compare to other communities, but I like being number 3. There's room for improvement, but we're doing well. And this, again, just shows quality of life, I think, that folks can look into when they look to come to Cedar Falls, one way or the other, because our schools are renowned for doing very good things for kids and for families and educating kids. So I think in the big picture, again, there's room to improve, but I sure like where we stand right now.
Well, I think, Mayor, too, what we always like to talk about, and whether it's city, school, county, is, you know, one of the things that we do like to brag about is being efficient. And that is one of the things that Moodys looks at, too, is, you know, they're looking at our property tax base, which is the revenue side of it, but they're also looking at the expense side of it. And are we managing things, you know, conservatively, fiscally responsible? And I think this property tax rate, why we like to compare ourselves to those 20 largest cities, is it does show we are trying to do things efficiently, and we're trying to at least hold the expense side down as well while we're working at increasing the revenue. That's
a great point. It really is, because that is the expense side, and of course, you know, hiring folks, paying folks for any entity is the largest expense that they have. So I'd also heard that we're one of the leanest communities for our size, for employees per 1,000 that we have in a community.
Yep.
The next tax rate there, I wanted to show briefly, in fairness, but also just to reflect the fact that we're doing well, is the specific mill rate for Cedar Falls in and of itself. And there we're ranking 5th with 11.22. And again, a little bit more room for improvement, but as you kind of go down that list, if you will, again, it reflects, I think, good conservative principles that are in place for good long-term growth.
Well, and I think, you know, one of the things, too, that when we look at that, what we don't know about all those other communities is how did they also budget for the backfill? And not to get off on another subject, but it's all kind of tied together, is backfill revenue, for those that may not know, is the revenue that when the state legislature changed some things when they did that a few years ago and they rolled back property taxes on commercial and industrial, they had a promise that they were then going to pay that back or basically hold the cities and the schools on that. And for Cedar Falls, that's kind of in that range of $500,000 to $600,000. And as you know, Mayor, at Cedar Falls, we've tried to be, again, very conservative in our budgeting and think we don't know how long that's going to last. We know that at any time the state legislator could decide to take that away. Maybe they need it for their own budgeting purposes. And so for us, we've always felt like let's not depend on that. Let's set our tax rate. Let's do that, assuming we're not going to get it. And then if we do get it, we will use it for a one-time capital project. And why we say capital versus an operating cost is we know operating costs are ongoing. So if we use it 1 year for an operating and then the next year it's gone, then that causes problems. And so that's why we say if we get it, it's a one-time capital project. So what we don't know when we look at those other cities is, did they include the backfill, which would have helped lower the rate, where we did not? So you just, you try to do apples to apples, but you don't necessarily know the complete story exactly. So I guess in saying that, we don't know. Maybe those few that are doing a little better than us, maybe they did something a little different.
Sure. Well, you never want to wish ill will on other communities.
No.
But it'd be interesting to see, what would happen with that backfill dollars.
Right.
I remember when you were describing to me the backfill and our valuation. I don't know if there's a correlation or not, but we noted it's almost $600,000 the backfill, which we did get.
Right.
So I think we applied that to one of our construction projects. So that was the money we could have lost if they didn't give it to us.
Right.
But I think to your point earlier in the program is that our valuation went up about $600,000.
Right.
That was that sort of even Steven to what the state might do to the position we're in to be able to cover any potential loss of that revenue coming from the state.
Yeah.
No, it's great stuff. So one of the final things I want to cover here, and this is always incredible to me, is one of the factors Moody looks at is our debt margin. And so you can see here, it's almost scary too low here, Jennifer. I don't know if that's fair to say or not. But first of all, will you explain briefly, what the debt margin is, what these numbers represent, that 4.17, and sort of, again, the effect and the positive effect that even someone like Moody's would look at?
Sure. Well, just to kind of make sure everybody understands how that works is, for cities, when we want to finance projects, large projects, we sell bonds to do that. It's kind of similar to, if I want to buy a house and I got to go get a mortgage to pay for it. For us, it's the tool we use is selling bonds. And so one of the things, though, that we are limited on, and this is under the Code of Iowa, is that we can only have bonds outstanding that they have to be less than 5% of our total property tax valuation. So again, kind of tying all of this together is when we look at selling bonds, we do have that cap of 5% of our valuation. Now, fortunately for Cedar Falls, you can see that the percentage of what we're using of that amount is only at like 4%. You may see other cities that are using 74% of their that debt margin. And what's concerning about that is we know that there could be emergencies that come, disasters that come, that at any time we may have to sell bonds to cover something like that. And for us, we don't have that worry of, oh gosh, now we're bumping our capacity and we can't do that. That's just not a worry for us. So that's the great thing about having it be so low. Now, in saying that, I think we know that there still are things that we want to go finance other projects for. And again, we have that capacity to do it. But we also understand by doing that, it does have an effect on the property tax rate. So I think for you and all the elected officials, it's kind of piecing that whole puzzle together of, hey, we don't have a lot of debt, but we want to do projects too, and how does that kind of work together?
And really, I think for the elected officials, it's on the premise that, in essence, we could afford it.
Right.
If we needed to for an emergency, or if there's a project that collectively the council votes to put in place that would improve the community one way or the other. I like equating the debt margin to people's personal finance. And once again, it's one of maybe a credit card or an amount of debt you would have based on your budget that you have for the year. You want to keep it lean and mean, but if there was that emergency, if you needed to take that airplane trip across the country, whatever, in a personal house that would come up, you need that capacity, and it looks like city's doing great shape as far as what we're in shape for. I want to thank you for joining me for this version of the Mayor's Corner. I know you oversee and you give great advice over the years, but in the context of what the elected officials take your advice and moving forward, we certainly are reaping the benefits of all that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
And thank you for this joining me, this edition of the Mayor's Corner. We hope to see you soon. Thank you.